funny because it's like you've got these four bodies which have the roughly 26-degree axis tilt. You figure those four had to have been captured as a group, right? Saturn, Neptune, Mars, and Earth.
Right.
Okay, you've got Venus, which is a new planet, right? It's 850 degrees on the surface. So that didn't exist before this final capture. Okay, Venus has only existed after the Saturnian system was already captured by the sun, or in the process of being captured. Okay, and then you've got Uranus, which Troy has his own little theory about Uranus. He figures that Uranus might have been part of the original Saturn, Neptune, Mars, Earth system, but it was the lead planet during the capture, so it got buffeted more than the others, right? And may have been thrown off to, as far as its act, it's laid over on its side. Okay, now Troy doesn't own a time machine any more than I do, right? So that's just, I like to keep, conjectures straight from things which I believe I could demonstrate or prove. You understand what I mean? It's like when you talk about, the four bodies with the 26-degree axis tilts, I believe that's demonstrable. What happened was that those four bodies flew into the plane of the Sun-Jupiter system from at roughly a 26-degree angle, and as the individual bodies peeled out and began to orbit the way they do now, then ordinary gyroscopic force caused them to retain that 26-degree angle of approach in the form of axis tilts. Does that make sense?
Yep. Does to me.
I've been thinking about the sun, and I watched Donald Scott's YouTube video today. I don't know if you had the chance to look at it. About he says that basically the Birkeland current is what the sun, the heliosphere, and the heliopause is traveling, is attached to, right? And then he talks about the zip hinge, and I kind of feel that that's I don't know how this would fit into by the way, I've watched your videos before, long ago, and I listened to Troy's interviews with Red Eyes Radio since, I guess, 2012, like, when was it? Not that long ago, 2014, whenever he was with Henrik Palmgren. And so I am familiar with what your theories are. I mean, maybe not everything exactly perfectly down to I might made a little mistakes here, but I think I get the picture of what you're saying. And I rewatched the video yesterday that Greg sent me. And so I was thinking about the model, so you don't have to explain it to me because I did look at the video. And then I was thinking about the Birkeland current, and I know how the formation, the Herbig-Harold formation is works. So I do understand that. And then I'm thinking that maybe after that happens, that I know that fission through fission. I'm not a scientist, so I'm just trying to put it together in layman terms for the people that don't know science and understand the terms. But that's how I understand it. So forgive me for not saying it perfectly, but maybe you get what I'm saying, and if you don't, you can maybe explain. But what I'm thinking is that. So after the Herbig-Harold formation occurs with the stars along that bead, the plasma filament, then some of the stars can fission due to the electrical voltage that they're receiving, from the whole thing occurring from the whole birth process, and maybe a little bit afterwards, or just the Birkeland current becoming energized, and this energy going through the bodies, just like probably happens through all stars, and that's why they change their color. That's what I have learned. But then they do fission, and then planets like Venus, that occurred with Venus, and probably because of what, like you said, that they came into the heliosphere, which is, to me, in my mind, I might be incorrect, but according to the Donald Scott model, that's what I probably had thought about this. That's when the whole thing happened with Saturn, Uranus, and it happened in like a domino effect. So it was really fast, and the mythologies kind of say that's the case, it didn't stay like for a very long, because they remember it and they have it like in this little story. So that's what I'm thinking. And of course, I might not be correct, and I don't say I am. I'm just trying to figure it out. And then it would be the Birkeland currents when they came in. And anyway, so I don't have an infrared telescope and said everything is telling me this. No, I went to the texts, right? And like according to the text, and Velikovsky, of course, because he is the foundation of all of this. I think for everyone, he's been, like everyone says, the door, opening the doors to look at things differently and consider another story of how things happened and the history of the solar system. So I went from there, and I thought Uranus is there. He talks about Uranus. I want to know more about Uranus. And so I went and I tried to dig as much as I could, and in the mythologies and from everywhere, you know, like all the myths, not only the Greeks, but everything. So that's what I was trying to do. And like Greg knows, it's very confusing. We're trying to figure out, just like Neptune. Who was Neptune?
The mythology and the literature we have is from the last 8, 10, 12,000 years. Okay, Troy and I are going back further than that. Troy and I are talking about things which may have happened more like 40, 50, 60,000 years ago.
Yeah, you go a little way back, yeah.
Okay, it's like we're talking about the age that you had, you know, the Purple Dawn age before this final capture of the southern part of the system. Now,
you know what? The Purple Age, I just wanted to tell you before I forget, did you know that they depict Helios, the original Helios, not Shamash or Apollo, but the original Helios, which is spoken of by Diodorus Siculus, really, really interesting, like very, very explicit and very clearly. Did you know they depicted him in purple? Isn't that interesting?
No, I didn't know.
A purple cape and purple boots. So purple was his color. And I thought, oh, I have to tell that to Greg, and so he could tell you. But now that I have you here on the line, I'm telling you. So I think maybe you should research about Helios and see what you think.
Helios, according to who now, is depicted in
Diodorus Siculus. Well, according to many. If you look in my book, I have gathered. I try to gather what all the ancient historians, including the Greek, the Roman, but these are a lot of the Greek people talking about him. And you can go to theoi.com or to my book and then read everything you can about Helios. And they have a lot of links. It's just, Greg has seen it. They have just amazing links there. And Diodorus, that's where I was reading this little story where, well, his story that I made up my little I made up my little model, and probably people are thinking, oh, you know, she's crazy. But that's what happens with people. When they come up with a model, they usually say you're crazy, but then maybe it turns out not to be so crazy. But anyways, that's just, I mean, like I said, I'm not a physicist, so I'm just trying to, from my little perspective, humble perspective of researcher, trying to just give an idea for people to pitch in and go and look at it.
Purple were considered to be the, royal colors, and even
yes,
in the Middle
I know, but isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
I thought that was quite interesting.
The explanation for that you read in history books is wrong. You know, they say that both of those, gold was always expensive and that purple dye was expensive. That's lame. Okay, I mean, gold and purple were the royal colors because those were the colors of the sky in the 2 ages prior to our own age. Okay.
Yeah.
You had a purple age and then a golden age. Those were the colors of the sky in those ages. Now, Greg or Troy McLaughlin and I were talking about co-authoring a book or collaborating on a book in 2011 and 2012. Okay, and I was seeing several kinds of things at the time. I'm like a math major from school, right? It's like I'm good at putting pieces of things together. I was seeing pictures of the dinosaurs with their huge eyes, and then these new images of the Neanderthal of Danny Vendermenes, and yes. Vendermene paints the Neanderthal as a kind of a very advanced bipedal ape with dark world eyes.
Yes.
Right. And the thing that jumps out at you is the eyes, right? I mean, it's a fabulously bug-eyed sort of creature. Now, at the same time, we were looking at, I was looking at these images from Troy's Saturn death cult, right? I mean, the Purple Dawn age. And You know, I at some point too, things clicked in my mind. I said, Troy, we're looking at this whole thing the wrong way. You know, it's like Mars could no more. We were talking about positing the idea, you know, because of all this evidence of past civilization on Mars. You know, we were talking about a book which would describe human origins coming from Mars. I said Mars can no more serve as a primary human home world than the Earth could. Mars was in the same purple, you know, heliosphere of the Saturnian system, right? Whereas humans and dolphins have the smallest relative eye sizes of advanced creatures. In other words, a believable human home world is going to need three things that the Earth never had in those days. It's going to have to be bright because of the relatively tiny eyes. It's going to have to be wet because of the aquatic adaptations, which Elaine Morgan goes over. And it's going to have to be safe. It's going to have to be safe not only from cosmic radiation, but from sea monsters. They cannot be sharks or other kinds of sea monsters in a believable human home world. You know, humans don't swim as efficiently as seals or dolphins. We have no defense against sea monsters. Okay, so that, you know, if you've got like a dual system, which is what Troy was talking about, where you've got a northern system which is bright, you know, the sun and Jupiter and possibly Mercury, maybe one or two other kinds of things, and then a very, very darkish, purplish, deep purple world that Troy describes in Saturn Death called the deep purple cosmos, you know, the Saturnian cosmos. The humans have to have arisen on the bright side of this thing, you know, possibly on some sort of a body which was in orbit at the time, which had disappeared or got blown up or something. Now, it didn't occur to me that there might be something which is still in existence, which would serve as a believable home world, but Troy immediately heard that and he said, good God, you're talking about Ganymede.
Ted, have you ever looked at moons going around Uranus?
No.
Well, you know, they got Triton. And also, if you put our moon with the moons of Uranus, you can barely tell them apart. Earth took this moon from Uranus.
Okay, that couldn't have been there.
That was a good find, Greg. You put it together.
Greg, the conditions for human origins in or around Uranus would not have been there. Whereas with Ganymede, they're in spades. Right? Ganymede had everything that you would be looking for. You know, without these other bodies, Jupiter would have been up close to the sun, right? Which is the normal situation in our galaxy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Jupiters that you read about. Okay, it's like John Cook. He spells his name J-N-O, right? Okay, John Cook has done the calculations. Said that like he came up with Jupiter being about 0.7 angstrom astronomical units. You know, in other words, 0.7 of the distance from the Earth to the Sun now. Is in just a little bit closer to the Sun than we are now, right? There's there's another funny thing that you get into with Ganymede, where they're trying to explain two things. You know, they're claiming there's like about a 600-kilometer deep outer mantle of salt water on Ganymede. That's a false claim, but I can tell you why they're trying to make a claim like that. They're trying to account for two things. They're trying to account for the ultra low moment of inertia. That is almost most of the mass of Ganymede is concentrated towards the center. Okay, and they're also trying to, that says you got something light, which is water around the surface, you know, deep. They're also trying to account for this intrinsic magnetosphere. It's only Ganymede and Earth that have intrinsic magnetospheres to protect you from cosmic radiation, and that's something you have to have, right? Of the rocky bodies in our system, the only two which have an intrinsic magnetosphere, the Earth and Ganymede.
But I have a question about that. Don't you think that from Velikovsky, from the ancients, talking about how the atmospheres, the ancients saw the atmosphere of Mars being ripped, basically, like when it came Venus came close to it, and with all the different catastrophes and going by all the planets and Neptune having all these interactions, don't you think that atmospheres would actually be exchanged? And like now the planet, the moon is already growing an atmosphere. Don't you think that also that could have been, I mean, I do believe that Ganymede definitely sounds like a planet that definitely would have been inhabited. Don't get me wrong, but I think that we also could consider that atmospheres are exchanged and between planets, like Velikovsky pointed out, and
To some
by
extent, but it's like you can't.
by what they witness and the
Yes,
stories.
the Earth doesn't need anything from other places in order to have a breathable atmosphere. You have oxygen being outgassed from the planet, right? It's like you've got Venus sitting there, which might be habitable 10,000 years from now, right? Or if they put their mind, could find some way to shorten that. You know, Venus, you could try to the Venus, you could try to make habitable if you put your mind to it. Mars is still inhabited. Okay, you've still got people and small animals living on Mars. I mean, that shows.
I mean, they were right. I mean, there's structures and there's all kinds of things that point to, and the stories also. There's some stories that there was people coming from there. Arriving from.
Tess, have you ever seen the picture of the little ground squirrel on Mars?
No, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Of all these pictures, this is the clearest. Just get on Google, type in
yeah,
squirrel
I
on Mars.
believe. Yeah, I definitely believe there's definitely structures and a lot of things that it had water. I mean, right? There's a lot of there's water in it right now, but yeah, there's structures that definitely point to it having been definitely inhabited. Definitely, I actually think that many of the planets and moons on the solar system were inhabited. That's what I'm thinking, and that's what I have read and come up with, found out. Points to they were definitely
okay. This is the picture. Can you see the picture here?
Yes.
This is from an actual NASA JPL image, right?
Oh yeah, that looks like a mouse, but I like squirrels and mice, except not mice. That's cute. I used to have a pet squirrel when I was younger, so that looks like rodents.
I've had friends that thought I was jerking them for years that saw that and they were just shocked. I mean, you could see the hair stand straight up and fall over their face. Say, good funny. God, Tim, that's a squirrel. No kidding. That's as plain can be. You know, the human visual system is very good at recognizing familiar forms, right? Everybody's seen squirrels. You've got small animals and people living on Mars, and they're spending most of their lives underground, right? There are all kinds of portals to subterranean areas. And, you know, they're coming out for an hour or 40 minutes in the middle of the day for vitamin D, right, and sunlight. Okay, but they're not living on the surface. They've never made the effort to rebuild the surface. Okay, the surface still lies in ruins. It's like most of Mars looks like somebody just, like the whole planet was just picked up and shaken the way a dog might shake a rat, okay, by these catastrophes, you know, so they're still living in a ruined world.
Yes.
Back to Bear
Have you ever heard about Aomawa Shields?
About what?
This woman, because when I was reading and listening to the theories that you have, I mean, maybe now you have come up with newer findings when you're saying that how planets or NASA or the mainstream says that it would be very difficult to live inside of the red plasma sheath of a red or brown dwarf. I like to call them red just because I don't know red, but there could be red or brown. And actually, I was looking at this woman. She's from the University of Washington. She's an astronomy and astrophysics postdoctoral fellow. And she actually has good information on how they're the most habitable planets to find life inside of the plasma sheets of the red dwarfs. Yeah. And I think you would enjoy that because then that fits in with your theory that she says definitely that's the best place. And then she explains how their eyes can't be formed usually planets could be tidally locked. I mean, of course, they come up with models, and the temperature would be lovely all around the planet, even if it was tidally locked into the star, to the dwarf star.
Well, the problem.
Yeah.
Yes, let me tell you the problem with that. The problem is that it's there's at least an even chance, I figure it's probably the case, that humans are adapted to bright environments, right, which would be like a planet, like a situation like you had with Jupiter and orbit around the sun, right? Now, which was like a gas giant planet, by the time humans were living there, right? It's like, or a dying dwarf star. When a dwarf star is captured by main sequence star, the dwarf star dies out, right? It's as if you had a 200-foot lightning rod glowing in a storm, and all of a sudden the Acme lightning rod company's truck drives up. The guys get out and build a 1,000-foot tall lightning rod, like 200 feet away. Well, the smaller lightning rod is going to stop glowing. It's not going to be the focus point of any sort of a discharge anymore. So the discharge is going to come to the bigger lightning rod. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep.
What Troy describes, look, what I'm showing you here, like on the screen, is bearforfreaks.org, okay? Greg J's videos, right? Reason to reject Saturn being captured from deep interstellar space. That I like. I would recommend you watch that. A couple of things about the nature of the Neanderthal, right? The Tower of Babel, Antediluvian, the Antediluvian telepathic age. All of this stuff is interesting.
Yes.
Okay. Thunderbolts, other videos, right? YouTube channels. My own YouTube channel, which is, toy airplanes, politics, whatever. The Ganymede Hypothesis YouTube channel. You can just get on YouTube and type in Ganymede Hypothesis.
Yes.
And go to where it says videos. And the video you want to watch first is this thing of Troy's here, which is called the Ganymede Hypothesis Parts 1 and 2, where he talks about the way solar systems form up from Herbig-Haro strings. Right, a Herbig-Haro string is just a Birkeland current with stars. You see, it's like gravity is like by 40 orders of magnitude the weakest force in nature. It cannot form up solar systems out of dust. The thing that really can form solar systems are these electromagnetic pinch points that you get where the parts of a Birkeland current cross each other, right? You get electric circuiting.
Yes.
So that you get what looks like shish kebabs out there with the shishes all lit up, or a string of Christmas tree lights which has been pulled taut.
Right, along the plasma filaments. So there would be plasma filaments. It's just they're just calling them Herbig-Haro.
Tree lights. So you've got what you had originally for our system was like a Herbig-Haro string, which included everything that you see in our system now in one Herbig-Haro string. After that, the southern part of this thing, which included Saturn, Mars, Earth, Neptune, anything else, broke off, okay, and broke off and began to tilt at this 26-degree angle that you see, right? Now, the northern part, what you had happen was that the sun, Jupiter was on the far side of the sun at that point. The sun caught up with Jupiter, speeded up, caught up with Jupiter, and then the act of catching up with and capturing Jupiter caused that whole system to slow down, so that eventually the southern part of the system, which included particularly Saturn, Mars, and Earth, caught up with that northern part and was captured. And at that point, then you're talking about 10 or 12,000 years ago, and you're talking about the stuff that you read about in the Bible, story of the flood, and story of the catastrophe stories that you read about, that Velikovsky was writing about, that Ignatius Donnelly wrote about earlier. Okay.
Yes.
So that this video of Troy's is worth watching. That's our vision.
Right.
Okay. Now, what I believe happened, Troy and I are not on the same page completely on this one. It's like what I believe. I'm going to give you my version of it. When you drop a basketball, like if you hold a basketball up 4 or 5 feet, shoulder height, drop it on the floor, it's not going to just stay there, right? I mean, that would be like a deadfall hammer.
Right.
It's going to bounce a few times, but each time it bounces, it comes a little bit closer to being, captured by the floor. and then it finally stays down on the floor, right? Now that's what I believe happened with the Saturnian system. It's like it was pulled in towards the Sun-Jupiter system. It hit this plasma sheath of the suns, right? It bounced back a few times, then finally it was captured, right? Now, the first time you had that happen, the two things on the outside of these two respective systems were going to be the two large rocky bodies, which on the Saturn system side was Earth, and on the Sun system side was Ganymede. So these are the two bodies that would have come close to each other before the southern system was ever captured. You had an electrical water bridge forming between Earth and Ganymede. You had a bunch of people. This is where I need, like, Cecil B. DeMille, right? I need to find somebody, you know, like one of your prophets, you know, like Samuel, you know, that can channel Cecil B. DeMille or something.
Well, Ted, I think, how long do you think it took, and I know it's just going to be a guess, but when the Herbig-Haro system split up, would they have organized relatively quickly, or could it have taken thousands of years? Because what I'm thinking it was a triple dwarf
For the hell
system.
of it is, Greg, that there are bits and pieces of this story that I don't have that I'd like to have. Okay, it's like, you know, the cover of the book, this book is called Cosmos in Collision, right? The cover of the book says, you know, that we have not, this book does not answer every question which people will have about origins, but some of the questions which it does answer are big ones. You know, like the question of where the first humans in our own system were living, right? That's a big question. We have not answered the question of where the first humans in the universe came from. That I've got no clue. Troy has no clue. You know, for that, God knows. You just
See, with your theory,
tell time. But the reason for the
and Sirius.
yeah, Tess, don't be shy. Just jump in. You're being too polite.
Sirius, who could be Osiris, and Diodorus Siculus goes into all of these. Yes, and also Velikovsky. Well, not Velikovsky, but the mythology says that Aphrodite was born of the severed genitals of Uranus. Sky have genitals
Exactly.
if it's not planets.
Exactly.
And where would the planets be orbiting? I mean, they could be free floating, but I don't think this story talks about free floating planets because they had Uranus.
Right.
Well, let me tell you what the thing is about the antediluvian lifespans. Okay, the biggest source of stress on land animals is gravity. Okay, the gravity was being attenuated in prehistoric times by this much stronger surface electrostatic field charge of the Earth.
Right.
Surface charge, right? It's like this is what allowed the super animals. You have these super animals which were walking around, which would be crushed by their own weight in our present world. Okay, and gravity is also the most major source of stress on land animals. You know, if you had your present level of strength and only weighed 20 pounds, there would be no stress.
Yeah.
You could live a great deal longer. Now, there's a funny kind of a thing when you talk about Methuselah living for 900 years, right? Well, you don't know what the word year would have meant before the flood. The flood totally, the catastrophe of capture totally rearranged the solar system.
Right. Yeah.
What the hell it is that you don't have to know that.
We hope you'll enjoy this mainstream moment.
To the north. They were raised to their present height about 65 million years ago from the bottom of the sea. And what is
that? But they do have times in the Bible. They tell you years of how long Adam lived and Methuselah, and so they're just. And I think that's why there were so many calculations too. They were just trying to calculate what would be the closest to what they had according to this time frame and timeline, because it was difficult. It was not that.
That's what a year was, like in ancient times. You can understand from the ratios that their lives were different than ours. Okay.
Yeah.
If you just go by ratios, then I would guess that they were living to be about 300 of our years, something like that, right? I mean.
I think that's about right. And in the Heliades, when you read about the Heliades, in the ancient Atlantean, that's the Atlantean, which is supposed to be, I think, up until 3600 BC. So it didn't really stop in 6000 BC or after the big flood, if you count it like that, of Saturn going nova. For example, they were saying that the people in the Heliades, Diodorus telling the story, that's what they told him, he's passing it on, wrote it in his books, that the people would live up to 150 years. Once they reach 150 years, they would commit suicide. They would take their little, I don't know what, opium or some kind of plant, and they would just die peacefully. That's what they would do, 150 years.
That's strange.
So that
Anyway, look,
sounds kind of like more like logical, not so outrageous.
let me show you something else here. Look, it's like, go back to this website of mine is called bearfabrique.org, like a bear in the woods, and then the ordinary European word for factory, which is Fabrique.
Maybe Greg can put it for you on the comments and,
Right.
and the description.
Germans and Russians would spell that Fabrique, right? But this is French spelling, bearfabrique.org. Some of the things, some links to some of Greg's videos,
Yay.
links to Thunderbolts. Okay, dinosaurs and gravity, this whole question of gravity that I just mentioned. A couple of links to these videos, right?
Yes.
Other videos, Doc Green show appearances. Some of this stuff is interesting. YouTube channel, Steam It channel. Okay, that's something which I've been using as a blog recently. Let's go to that for a moment, because this is a combination of political stuff and renegade science, right?
Hey, what do you guys think about me just going live right
You can if you want.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
I'm
whatever.
going to start streaming.
Just play. Yeah,
Yeah.
you mean on the?
Yeah.
Sure. Just play. Just
See what happens.
experiment, Greg. Don't feel
Yeah.
bad.
Okay.
Just do it.
I'm doing it.
Feel
It's
free.
done.
Never regret experimenting. That's
All
good.
right, go ahead,
Like
guys.
this is my own little Steam It blog here, and that's linked from Bear Fabrique. Okay, and there's something I wanted to show. So there's several kinds of things. Jeffrey Epstein, right? It's like Saturn theory, Troy McLaughlin's Saturn Death.
Back. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, Troy's other book is called Saturn Death Cult, and that's where the rubber meets the road.
Yes. It's
That's
about
where
all
you
the yucky stuff of the world.
Yeah, that's where you connect the catastrophism to the modern, to current events, right?
But may I say something about the Saturn death cult? I
Yeah.
think I agree that, yeah, I don't know if that's because of Satan or what, of the Enki and Marduk thing, but I think all of them, all of the gods, that if you think that they were following, well, they were humans really pretending to be gods. They were not gods, called gods, they were just humans. But I think all of them were just terrible. I don't see any of them being good, of all sides. So I would like to call it, what could we call it? Saturn and Jupiter and
Yeah.
Uranus and all of the other cults, worship death cults? Because that's what I have found.
There were three aspects to these pantheon gods and goddesses. Okay, there was, they started off as astral bodies, cosmic bodies, right? So one of the aspects of the ancient gods were the cosmic bodies they were associated with. Another aspect was like the idols on Earth, which represented them, like where they're going to sacrifice children to some stupid little cast iron statue, of Shamesh or Baal, right? Which is made to burn children, right? It's like the third aspect of these things was these internal voices, which Julian Jaynes describes. Okay, now I've gone over this with Greg. It's like, what is it that separates me from the Thunderbolts group exactly? All three of here's the thing I wanted to show you when dwarf stars flare. All three of the things which I regard as most interesting are considered taboo subjects by the Thunderbolts group, right? Mars images, the idea of a telepathic age before the flood, and the Ganymede hypothesis, those three things, right? And of the three, the most interesting is Ganymede, because now you're talking about human origins, right? When dwarf stars flare, this is the story about Saturn, and a recent article on the topic of dwarf stars flaring, that's what it might look like, right? You've got the King James Bible, which talks about the 7 days before the flood, Genesis 7:4. But yet 7 days I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, right?
Yes.
Genesis 7:10, and so it came to pass after 7 days, the waters of the flood were upon the earth. What exactly are you talking about, right? That's a big mystery. You could
The nova?
ask all the preachers in your town or your city, like what exactly are these 7 days before the flood? None of them would, it's very rare that anybody knows what that means. The way that it's presented in the Yuppie Bibles is completely wrong, and there's a mistranslation involved.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's a mistranslation too. They
Well,
like
no,
to mistranslate words.
this is not, Genesis 7:4 and 7:10 are not mistranslated.
That's
The
correct.
mistranslation comes in Isaiah 30:26. That's the only other place in the Bible that talks about these 7 days before the flood, right?
The
Isaiah
nova.
30:26 is making a very
Yep.
vague reference. He's talking about the end of the world somewhere out in far time. He makes a vague reference, which he
Yes,
does
I
not
can speak.
explain, because he assumes that the people in his audience know what he's talking about, right? That they're familiar with the reference. He said, the light of the moon shall be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun shall be sevenfold as the light of 7 days. It should read as the light of these 7 days. Okay, it's been translated out of a language like
Yes,
Russian.
I can speak.
Use articles. You got 7 declension cases. You don't need words like V or A, right? Now, what actually, okay. Nonetheless, Isaiah 30:26 is mistranslated in all Yuppie Bibles, that is, in every English Bible other than the King James, at least as far as I know. Without reinserting the word "the" in the passage, what it looks like the prophet is trying to say would be as bright as if somebody were to somehow manage to cram 7 days worth of daylight into 1 day. Now, in fact, the NIV actually inserts the word full. The light of the sun shall be sevenfold as the light of 7 full days. What they do by that is to lock the mistranslation into place, okay? That's not what the passage means, okay? He's talking about these 7 days before the flood. Midrashic sources, the Old Testament is, the Torah is a Reader's Digest version of what you call Midrashim, this full body of very ancient rabbinical literature. Velikovsky listed Louis Ginsburg's Life of the Jews as his most major resource, right? Now,
well, the Talmud also, the Torah.
Yeah, used to be.
Got all those.
Okay, so it's like this is the full body of these stories, right? Midrashic sources absolutely connect Isaiah 30:26 back to the 2 passages in Genesis 7, claiming that God turned on the primordial lights of the universe for the week prior to the flood to commemorate the death of Methuselah. Have to get everybody's attention. What the prophet is saying is there were 7 days of intense light and radiation.
So it did happen at the death of Methuselah. Yeah, but that's talking about the nova, right? And it's giving you a time when Methuselah was right at when he died. That's what it means, right?
He died just before
yeah.
Okay. In other words, the flood itself was preceded by some kind of a major event within our system. And the flood story is part and parcel of some kind of a system-wide catastrophe, which is this Kepler event. The Sun-Jupiter system capturing the southern system. The kind of catastrophe you normally associate with blinding light and radiation would be a nova. Well, we can rule out the possibility of our present sun, which is a main sequence star, having gone nova at that time. That would have fried the whole system to cinders. You wouldn't be here. Right? The next item down on the list of things like that, which would in fact get your attention, but stop short of frying the entire system to cinders, would be for one of the dwarf stars, Jupiter or Saturn, to have flared, right? This is basically what happened. That's basically what brought about the flood at the time of Noah. That kind of a long story, but you can view 40 minutes or so of it where, this video which I mentioned of Troy's. Okay. So that's the story of the, the dwarf star fissioning or flaring. And it was Saturn, it wasn't Uranus. Right? Everything connects it to Saturn, right? It's like, people were worshiping Saturn. I mean, in the recent past.
I don't think that the big nova was Uranus. I think that what happened is that when Uranus came into the heliosphere, in contact with the heliosphere, as well as Saturn and Neptune, they lost their plasma sheets because, according to Walt Thornhill, they changed from being an anode to a cathode. and then they lost their glowing mode, I guess, the glow mode, and they went into dark mode, which turned them into brown dwarf. And then if they go out of the heliosphere, they would light up again into brown and red dwarf stars. And so I think that's what happened. And together with that, there was some flaring from Uranus, but they say that there was water coming. It flooded the Earth. That's what the stories say.
The water came from
It's
Saturn.
not as
It's like
bad as Saturn.
Yeah. You may have had both Uranus and Saturn inside one heliosphere, right? It's like you may have had a small double dwarf star system, and the Earth and Mars may have been part of something like that at some point.
I think it was a triple system.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, it's like I said, the Sun and Jupiter were definitely a separate system. Now, one of the big problems they always had with, this cosmology, at the Thunderbolts group was like, where was Jupiter while all this stuff was happening? Well, according to Troy myself, it's like we've got enough information to put that picture together now. It's like Jupiter was not part of the Saturnian system.
No,
exactly.
It wasn't. Yep,
it was part of the Sun.
That's right.
And the Sun and Jupiter have a relationship with the 11-year cycle of Jupiter, the orbit around the Sun. It has to do with the Sun's cycle of spots, the sunspot cycle. So I think that points to a relationship between the two of them being
Okay, well, the relationship
together.
The relationship says that they all have this less than 10-degree axis tilt right now. According to, you could start off with any theory of solar system formation you want, and, the spin axes of the bodies in the system should all be roughly perpendicular to the plane of the system, right? That should be normal. But that's not what we see. What we see is that you've got like the Sun and Jupiter and Mercury.
It's all mixed up. Yeah, I think that's just...
It's completely mixed up. The Sun, Jupiter, and Mercury do sort of like that. Spin axes are all less than 10 degrees, right? You've got Uranus and Venus that you have to account for. Each one of those has its own little story. And
I have a question. Does Venus, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's about this. Does Venus and Saturn have exactly the same axis?
No.
I don't think so.
No. Venus
okay, so then that kind of doesn't make sense, right? That it would have come out from Saturn. The mythology says that actually Jupiter captured a planet that was pregnant with Venus. And then Vulcan or Hephaestus, with a stroke, basically, he says with his hammer, but he was a CME, Jupiter, and that's when Venus came out. So it doesn't even say that it was just born out of Jupiter. It says that Jupiter kind of captured it from another planet, which I thought that was kind of interesting. But anyway, so I just wanted to bring that question in here because, I think that axis changes, that they can change from all the catastrophes that have happened because it was seriously just going.
Well, let me run something by you. It's like you've got one of the best mathematicians of the last century. It's Robert Bass, right, from Brigham Young University, who said two things. I mean, first off, he said that like the fact of Venus being upside down cannot, this 180 degree axis tilt cannot be primordial. It has to have arisen had to have been Earth, right? It couldn't have been anything else. Now, what that really says is that if Immanuel Velikovsky didn't exist, we'd have to invent him. Okay. So, no, that's right. Now, the other thing that Bob Bass said was that the Titus-Bode law of celestial dynamics, which gives the locations of the planets in our system, is basically the solution to a dynamical relaxation problem. Okay, what that says kills the main argument that astronomers had always used against Velikovsky. They'd always claimed that it would take millions of years for the system to stabilize itself and come to the kind of catastrophes Velikovsky was positing. Whereas Bob Bass said no. He said, you can start the planets in our system from anywhere now, and they would. You could start them from anywhere. They would be where they are now within a space of a few thousand years.
I agree.
Okay, that's without even considering electromagnetic forces.
Yes, exactly. It's fast action.
I'm okay.
Okay, all right. Just making sure. All right.
Yes. Yeah, I think that everything has happened so quickly that that whole thing about taking forever and never and never, I think it's wrong. And did you know, Ted, that there is also this interesting cycle that I just found about between Jupiter, Venus, Earth, that it's well, and the Sun, this alignment, electromagnetic, has to be electromagnetic alignment, and maybe it has to do with the current sheets that they interact. I mean, they connect or something like that. But I thought that was quite interesting. Every 575 years, and that has actually coincided with well, they call them close approaches, but actually they saw them as a comet of Venus. They think there was Venus getting close to Earth, and not as close as before, of course, but getting close enough to cause problems and to actually change the orbit of Earth. And then from that, the Earth, and that was as late as 44 BC, 530 AD or 531 AD, 680 AD, and then after those, because the next one will be like in the year 2200, I mean 2200, so we haven't come to the next alignment. But then what I saw that was very interesting is that there was also that we approached Mars much closer just a few decades after that in the 1700s. And I thought, wow, so what is going on there with Jupiter, Venus, that it's pulling it, that it gets to pull it. There's something there. So I don't know if they're in the same current sheet that I ended up there. And yeah, that's something interesting just to research on too. I don't have any, conclusions. And of course, like I said, I'm not a scientist, but I'm just bringing up the questions and maybe something for you to look into and maybe later on give me your input.
My own belief is that the system is stable now, that there is no further danger of anything happening like you read about in the Bible or in other ancient literature. There may be a danger.
It's just a cycle, right?
There may be a danger from a rogue asteroid, something like that thing that hit the Tunguska area, like in 1907, whatever that was, or a couple of other. Yeah. The thing which created the Chicago fire. Have you ever read Ignatius Donnelly's description of the Chicago fire and these fires in surrounding cities and towns, like in the late 1800s? That apparently was some sort of a cosmic event.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, there's been many. If you look at the books that I have in my website, you would be just like your jaw would just drop to the ground from to seeing what. It's like every year comet sighting. Oh, and this happened, and plagues and floods and earthquakes. And,
in the myth.
Yes, in the Enuma Elish, Ki is who is Earth, and what was the name in
Oranos? Ki and Oranos.
Well, Oranos, Anu. Anu is Sumerian. Yeah, exactly. It's equivalent, but yes. The Sumerian An or the Akkadian Anu were inseparable. And that's the story of the creation myth at the very beginning. And then Enlil comes and separates them and captures. It's Jupiter later on, but he could have been also Saturn in that specific story, because they changed the who is who, like the names, like Marduk became Jupiter. So I think it was, yes, it could have been Saturn, or that's what I was telling Greg, maybe, or in my book I put a question mark if there was also a Neptune, but that's in the Hittite or Hurrian story of creation. But yes, that's very interesting. They say that Enlil came and took away Earth from Anu, who is Uranus. So, and then
Yes.
do you remember the story? I don't have it right in front of me. But
no, I was just going by memory.
There's so much stories there to remember.
I know.
But look it up.
In your readings of mythology, do you come across anything which talks about, humans living in some sort of a paradisial set of circumstances on some other world in past ages? Does that ever come up?
In some other world? Wow. well, in the like the Greek mythologies or
You
of
see,
the Sumerian.
Any of them.
Well, the Sumerian mythologies say that the Anunnaki, and I heard that, I don't like that word because it just makes people think, oh, Sitchin, oh my gosh, okay, I can't listen to you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
the
I
Anunnaki
know.
actually come way before Sitchin, and there's so much information if you just look at the Sumerian myths and tablets that you don't need Sitchin in there at all. There's so much about the Sumerian gods, and they say that they came from well, from the heavens and from another
Yeah.
place, and then all the people in the folk, like in the folk, well, let's say the Mayans and all these, the Hopi. Greg is going to come out with a video where I put this story, and all these different tribes of North American tribes, not to mention the what's it called, the Dagon in Africa. They say that their grandparents or the grandparents and their ancestors came from the Pleiades, and they were Pleiadians. Now, I don't know if the planet was coming from the direction of the Pleiades, or they actually mean from the Pleiades, and which I know that we are supposed to be connected also through the Birkeland current to them. So maybe they could travel very fast, and maybe things have changed and moved. But yeah, I mean, it's in a lot of myths that their ancestors have come from somewhere else. Now, we as the people that live here, no, not so much, but definitely there's also a lot of myths from the Polynesian people that talk about the earth and the sky being in a tight embrace, and the color of the sky and the earth were the same color, and it was a copper or a golden color. And they don't say purple, but they'd say a copper or a golden color. And they couldn't see they couldn't see the stars and the moons or the planets for generations. And there was a thick mist or thick cloud that covered the earth. I've heard that as well. But as us coming from another place, I haven't yet found that. But if I do find it, and if I see things that it makes me understand that, I would let you know right away, because yes, you have to look. I mean, sometimes there's information and I miss it because I'm looking for something specific, and then I go back and I find something new, and I'm going, oh my gosh, why didn't I see this before? It's like right here in front of my face, and I didn't see it. So I'm going to go back and do a revisit the text and let you know. But yes, there's definitely things coming from other places.
Are you familiar with what Troy and I have had to? Are you familiar with what Troy and I have had to say about human origins?
Yes, that they came from Ganymede.
Yes.
So the first modern humans
In a water
water bridge.
bridge.
Now what we believe is that, like, and this is a big difference between what we're saying and what you read in standard books. We're saying that humans are not related to hominids like the Neanderthal. Only by similar design are we related to Neanderthals or any other hominids. Okay. Well, we're not descended from hominids. We've never interbred with
definitely. Oh, yeah, of course not. No. There's, definitely. I believe we're just different, different species.
You see the picture I've got here.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, it's possible. Yeah, why not? I mean, it's totally possible that the pretty people, the pretty people, is that the pretty people on the right? Oh, yeah, very pretty. The pretty lady came, or allegedly the males. Allegedly, the story says that the males came, and they mated with the not so pretty females. They made them prettier. I don't know. That's what the pictures are showing.
Never bred with anything like this. This is what a Neanderthal actually looks. The picture that I've got on the bottom here.
That's scary.
That is this. This is Danny Bendermini's reconstruction of a Neanderthal. It matches up exactly with everything we actually know about the Neanderthal and his remains, right?
But what about the redhead of the Neanderthals? That was after? That's at the top left?
The thing at the top here is garbage, okay? These are the kinds of pictures that you normally see. If you just get on Google and type in Neanderthal, right? These are the kinds of pictures you'll see. Now, the girl is a modern girl, right? She supposedly has
Don't say.
Yeah, well, they claim that humans have like 1 or 2% Neanderthal genes, right? Here's the deal, right? You know, we may have Neanderthal genes, They claim that people from Asia and Europe have a certain percentage of Neanderthal genes in common, right? But the people from Africa don't, right? Here's the deal. We share 60% of our genes with the banana, right? And that doesn't come from doing sex with bananas. That comes from eating bananas
Well,
forever.
you don't know that. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, they say you are what you eat, right?
Pretty crazy people.
Yeah.
If humans actually do have any Neanderthal genes, it would come from eating Neanderthals, not from having sex with them, okay? It's like,
Yeah, that too, of course. That's kind of. How about eating pork? Have you heard? Yeah, well, eating like pork and, well, I don't want to get into that, but yeah, there's some strange theories about that. Like pork being a mixture of human and like wild boar. Yeah, there's some like pretty horrendous stories.
like
Or
any,
rice that they put
it'd be the
genes,
same thing.
human
Any
genes on
sort of
rice.
genetic relation we have to pigs come from eating pigs, not from interbreeding with them.
No,
There's
no,
way
no,
in the
no. I know. No, not from
no way in
interbreeding,
the
but some
we could
kind
interbreed
of
with something like
no,
this.
no, of course, no, I didn't mean that. I meant some kind of crazy experiment or what they do now with their experiments.
Like the communists were doing that in the 1930s. They were going, Joseph Stalin wanted to create a race of super workers,
Yeah,
So his scientists
DNA
were
manipulation. Yeah.
trying to produce
Vaccine.
crossbreeds between humans and apes, right? They were trying to do that. It didn't work. I mean, subjects all died, right?
Yeah.
That's just stupid, right? I mean, but
Well, in this planet,
yeah,
it's kind
like
of difficult to be a
horses and
superhuman.
donkeys are much
Very
closer to each other than humans are to any hominids ever. And all mules are sterile, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so that you couldn't, what Troy says is that in order to have any sort of noticeable, genetic relationship with Neanderthals from interbreeding, it would have to have been very common. And that was, that's just ridiculous. If people, but nonetheless, they're making this mistake. It's like, and this is a grade school mistake, but you get people with PhD degrees who, like this Svante Pabo over there at Max Planck, who may have never had like a course in basic logic, It's like trying to think that some Neanderthal male would have raped a woman, and then rather than cooking her and eating her immediately afterwards as usual, he's going to try to keep her alive long enough to bear a cross-species. He's going to try to keep her alive long enough to bear a cross-species child, raise that child to reproductive age, and then have that child breed back into human populations without anybody catching on. Give me a break. That's stupid. I mean, in real life, it's like the Neanderthal females would have killed that woman the first time her new owner left her alone for 5 minutes. It's like, and the humans would not have tolerated a half-breed, that looked anything like that, right? I mean, they would have killed him too,
Yeah, that's very attractive, definitely.
No, they would not have needed a DNA test to determine who to kill for that kind of reason. It would have been obvious, right?
Yes.
And seriously obvious.
Yes.
This is, early human needle, Danny Vendermean, he draws these Neanderthals with a fur coat, right? Early human needles are common, right? Cro-Magnon needles are common, and nobody's ever found the first Neanderthal needle because a creature with a 6-inch fur coat doesn't require needles,
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, well, what do you think about the thought that the blueprints of well, I guess yes, this would fall into this category. The blueprint of the human, like a human or a hominid, like those very ugly beings down there. Well, I guess I say very ugly. Maybe they think they're beautiful because that's what they know. So I shouldn't say that. But the very strange looking beings down below, they're still very close to a human, although I don't know if they're considered human. But I believe that the blueprint would be practically everywhere, and the species would adapt to the different atmospheres and not gravity, but electromagnetic poles or whatever's in the planet or the moon that they are in, right? So they can survive.
Right, you're very close to what I believe. It's like, I believe that you're going to have what you've got. I believe that these charts which show common descent, supposedly taxonomic charts, I don't believe are evidence of evolution. I believe those are evidence of what you would call object-oriented design, like in software design and engineering, right?
Yes.
Like a pure object language like Eiffel or Java rather than something like C++, right? Where you
Yes.
have classes and subclasses, where you may have some sort of a base class for some sort of a bipedal creature with opposable thumbs, right? And then in bright worlds, you're going to have a subclass which looks like us. And then in dark worlds, you're going to have a subclass that looks like these two guys, on the bottom
Yes.
here.
Yes.
Now,
Now,
this,
did you know that the blue eye gene appeared on Earth because it has to do with what you're saying? Did you know that it appeared on Earth according to geneticists? Now, sometimes you go like, okay, do I want to believe what mainstream is saying? So sometimes it's hard because it's the only sources that we've got. So you got to think, is this correct or is not correct? But they said it appeared between 6,000 and 8,000 years ago.
that's very
on
easy
Earth.
to believe. Let me
From
tell you.
one ancestor. They're saying that from one ancestor who had it, and then that's with the blue eye. Now they say the green have melatonin in their eyes, which could be variations to the brown. But they said before that there was allegedly all the eyes would have been brown, and then they see the change in the genetic mark, and I don't have the name of the DNA of the gene right now that appeared, but I thought that was very interesting in the Black Sea area, the Caucasus. And so I thought, okay, well, this matches what I have been researching, because that's about the timeline when these beings were humans. They're just more advanced. Were supposed to have come and mixed with the Earthlings.
Okay, Tess, let me
And
run.
created these other, their royal bloodlines. And yeah, the others, they were not supposed to mix, but they went and mixed. There was other people that were not supposed to be mixing, allegedly. But anyways, so I thought that was interesting.
Let me run my own version of this sort of thing by Troy and I believe that there are two basic human groups on the Earth, or at least two, right? It's like you've got the group which is descended from Adam and Noah, which it's recent, right? Now
Yes.
This group of people was either created here ex nihilo or was brought here from somewhere else like 4, 5, 6,000 years ago, as per the Bible, right?
Right.
And Troy believes that these would have been the first Caucasians. Troy believes these would have been the first Caucasians, right? The first people
Yeah,
with yellow.
that makes sense. That makes sense, because that's what they describe them.
Okay, Ganymede.
Yeah, when Quetzalcoatl, or not Quetzalcoatl, when Hernan Cortez arrived in Tenochtitlan, which is Mexico,
Yeah.
and they saw him, they said, "Do you come from the stars?" And he was white and bearded.
Yeah.
Because Quetzalcoatl came from the stars. That's what they knew. Okay, so I agree. Yeah, so it backs up your.
You've got two groups. You've got two groups on the Earth, and they're genetically the same, but it's like the original cultures and technologies were totally different because of this gigantic span of time between the two. The earlier group, what you call Cro-Magnon man, what theologians used to call pre-Adamites, right, were the group that originated from Ganymede, right? Ganymede was a warm place. You've got water everywhere. You've got like a freshwater ocean world. You've got bergs of, this low moment of inertia is created by pumice, not like a gigantically deep outer mantle of salt water, right? The water is fresh water, right? It's like, but it's a warm world. It's like you've got the, radiation. You've got radiant energy coming from both the sun and what's left of the dwarf star. And, it's like white skin and yellow hair not going to be a formula for success in that world, right? I picture the people on Ganymede being dark skinned. I don't picture them looking like Africans exactly. Probably look more like Dravidians or like the native people of Australia or Polynesia, right? But these are going to be the people that were walking around on the earth before Adam and Eve, right? Now, the Bible itself, the Torah, or what we call the Old Testament of the Bible, is a family album. Okay, it doesn't, it's like leftover Cro-Magnons were not part of the family, right? In other words, it does not speak of, it doesn't talk about leftover Cro-Magnons directly. You have to infer that from context, right? Cain's wife, leftover Cro-Magnon, right? Whoever Cain was worried about killing him, when supposedly he and Adam and Eve are the only three humans walking around on the planet. Right. Now you get theologians nowadays that say, well, he must have been worried about Adam and Eve having other children and they might kill him. No, that's pretty lame. Okay, I mean, Adam and Eve could easily enough tell their other children, like, hey, don't do any harm to Cain, right? I mean, he's got his own problems, right? That's he's talking about leftover Cro-Magnons, right? So that you've got these two groups. Genetically, all humans in the universe, I believe, are pretty nearly the same, right? It's like
right.
government,
yeah, the blueprint. Yeah.
one family, right?
Yes.
But
yes.
these two, what I call Bible Antediluvians, the people descended from Adam and Noah, and then the Cro-Magnon descendants, which are going to be, the people descended from Adam and Noah are going to be most of us, right? The Cro-Magnon descendants are going to be like your indigenous peoples of the world, which is going to be your native Australians, going to be the Spanish Basque, the Japanese Ainu,
Ainu. Yes.
Probably most American Native Americans, probably some, but not all Native Africans.
Some,
right?
yeah.
The San people, and some Northern European groups, extreme Northern European groups, might actually be Cro-Magnon descended, right? Like I said, genetically they're close enough for government work, easily interbreedable, right? But the original cultures and technologies were totally different. The most major aspect of technology in ancient times was weapons, right? And the weapons of the Bible, the sword, the sling, the spear, and the bow, right? Whereas the two signature weapons of Cro-Magnon men were the boomerang and the atlatl. Now, the atlatl is a fearful weapon. It's a much more powerful weapon than a sling, and Alexander had absolutely no way of finding out about it, atlatls, right? If he did, he would have had them. But in all of Europe and all of Asia, when Alexander was alive, there was no way to find out that there was such a thing as an atlatl, right? The Spanish, like I said, there was the signature weapon of Cro-Magnon people. The Aztecs were trying to use them against Spaniards, right? And the people of Australia are using them right now to hunt kangaroos with and to kill fish with. Now, what I believe to be the case is that the atlatl had been a fishing weapon on Ganymede, so that Cro-Magnon humans didn't have to invent the atlatl from scratch. I mean, when they came here to Earth and had to deal with Neanderthals, they just said, hey, we've got these goofy things walking around. We're just going to take the fishing points off the atlatl spears and substitute some sort of a more lethal point, right? That's all they had to do. There's one gigantic piece of technology which, if there was any sort of a continuum between Cro-Magnon man and the people of Genesis, which there isn't, if there was any kind of a continuum, then there's one thing which you'd really have to work to try to explain because it's just totally missing. It's the idea of the wheel, as a means of transportation, right? Now, this is the no Cro-Magnon descended group. None of the indigenous people apparently ever had wheels. None of the people that I would consider to be descended from Cro-Magnon man ever had wheels. And this flummoxed the Spanish big time. The Spanish are sitting there looking at all these temples and pyramids and all this fabulous civilization sitting there in Mexico City. They're saying, how in the world can these people have achieved this kind of a level of civilization and not have wheels, right? Well, the answer, I think, is that if your ancestors had just spent the last 20 or 50 or 100,000 years living in water, well, then the idea of a wheel might never occur to you. Does that make sense?
Well, I lost. You lost me at the. Okay, wait. The people that built Teotihuacan didn't have wheels because they were coming from the ocean. But how did they build Teotihuacan if they didn't have? I mean, they needed some technology. Is that what you're saying? No.
Nobody in the Americas had wheels. Now, if I put myself in the position.
I think that the pre-Atlantean, actually not pre-Atlantean, the Atlantean civilizations, who were the ones that built all the amazing megalithic sites, they were just this group of people that had all the technology, and the local people didn't have anything. They just were the masses who actually did all the labor and the work. But the people who designed that, like Thoth, and Quetzalcoatl, who was Thoth, well, the equivalent of Thoth, it could have been him or Ningishida, because they said that he also came from the other side of the ocean, and they have the technology. So, but yeah, so that's what I think. That's how I see it. But from what I read,
guys, we got a problem. The folks can't hear Ted. Tess, go
the
ahead.
people in Sumeria, the people, the Anunas or the lords in Sumeria, call the Sumerians the black-headed people, and the Egyptians also call them the black-headed people. So just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I always wondered about that. That was something that was like, what is that? What's
The
that about?
black-headed people. And it's the Chem in Egyptian. And the interesting thing also is that the civilization of Teotihuacan that we were talking about actually is the Chem Anahuac, which is the same name as the Egyptians. Go ahead.
Sorry, Tess. Now they're saying that they can barely hear us.
That you met Velikovsky. What a blessing.
Just briefly, and that was once at that conference.
Well, that's enough. That's great. Yeah. Well, what I think about him, that why he was being so attacked, is because the sources that he was looking into, from all the rabbinical amazing sources and all those Jewish sources, I think they were not really meant for the masses. They were not really meant for mass consumption, especially for the Gentiles. So I think that when Velikovsky went ahead and shared all that amazing information, then they had to have blowback, and people who completely wanted to push him down and discredit him.
Reasons for that. Which are not well known or understood. One had to do with Lee Atwater and this whole situation with the planetarium at Harvard. The astronomers particularly hated Velikovsky, and that was part of the reason why.
Yeah.
Terrible.
It blows my mind that they were just so against him like that.
Well, I think that's why, to me, because otherwise it is so amazing information that instead of saying, wow, let's look into this, they just went quickly and just squashed him, just ridicule him and made his life, miserable, make him so depressed. He was depressed, he just did not expect the world to say
it was there for a moment,
treat him that way.
International runaway bestseller.
Well, as you could imagine, I was quite bummed out at that point, but I always have a backup. And I, once again, wisely chose to record the conversation, and I thought it was pretty good. I really enjoyed myself on this one, and I tried to just let Tess and Ted talk as much as they could, but there were a few times I was chomping at the bit to get in there. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I still have another part to do and get out to you, and in the meantime I'll be putting out a space show soon. Alright, if you got anything from this, or if it enlightened you at all, please thinking about coming to Patreon or donating to my PayPal. Go to a really good cause. Alright, that'll do it for me tonight. I'll see you soon. Take care. I'll see you on down the road.